very warm welcome to my monthly talk, expert session, masterclass, whatever you want to call it. Today the topic is efficiency and alignment through intuition, and I'm excited that I'm not doing this alone. I have a wonderful, wonderful friend here, Bonnie. Actually, if you help me pronounce your last name, it's got so many S in there.
Yeah, it's Bonnie Casamassima, and Bonnie works just fine.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that so beautifully. So yeah, Bonnie is a researcher, educator, and highly sensitive, intuitive empath. She is dedicated to nurturing people's joy-driven lives through fostering their innate intuitive connection. Her support focuses on primary research, intuition mentorship, and research-rooted speaking engagement. So Bonnie and I, we know each other from a mastermind that we've been together on in the last few months. And I can only say that Bonnie is an incredible person. And I know that what I love about you is this mix of like, you do the research, which is very much me with my very brainy personality and things going on. Intuition, we're probably going to talk about that, is not always my strong forte, but you combine the two. And this is where I get excited, because when people speak to my data side of things, and then they bring in that little thing that for me seems a little bit more woo, I get excited, because if it's only that part, I'll be like, I'm not sure really if that's like for me. But if it's a combination, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I know there is reason and data that proves that this has validity. So yeah, I'm really excited to speak with you today. Maybe if you want to tell the people who don't know you a little bit more about you, how you got to, becoming that researcher and that intuitive guide and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it's so great to be here with you, Anne, and it was wonderful being with you in the mastermind community, and it's wonderful to be here with your community as well. I guess in a nutshell, it's been quite the journey. I'll share, but I had worked in the corporate world, and as a research professor after that, working predominantly with graduate students, helping them on their research projects and teaching them the research protocols. So very analytical, very like I still love spreadsheets. Those are my jam. And along the way, I started meditating for stress reduction from a friend's recommendation. I was working, 60 plus hours a week. I really enjoyed the people I worked with. I loved what I was doing, but I was working a lot of hours. And it was so hard for me to meditate at first, because I was so go, 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 go all the time. And this is probably almost a decade ago now when that started. But it felt really right in my body. I couldn't really explain why. I just knew like, this feels really good for me to sit down and still my body and mind for a little bit. The most I could do was a 2-minute recorded meditation on YouTube at the time. And, but again, something felt right about it. So the next day I did a 3-minute meditation and built up a practice. And long story short, one day during meditation, I started, I was sitting there, and all of a sudden in my mind's eye was a very, very clear visual of a woman's face. And it was as if her face was, popping through curtains that moved open. And I remember in that moment, I jumped back. I was like, what just happened? It scared the crap out of me. And then when I was able to get back in my body and how it felt, or like kind of like focus back in my body and get out of my analytical mind, it felt so loving and so warm and so peaceful that when I got the visual, what I now realize is that was my grandmother that I hadn't known in my life. She passed away before I was born. And that kicked off this multi-year journey of finding mentors, trying to understand what intuition is, what are the different ways it comes. And along the way, I was at this difficult crossroads for me, at least. Am I this research professor or am I an intuitive medium? And I'm curious, if you've ever had a time where you've been at this, like, am I this or am I that?
Yeah. That is an interesting question. When I'm thinking about intuition, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Because what always made me curious about intuition, oh, we have someone joining, is the whole, what initially for me, it was, okay, it's like a gut feeling. You have a
Mm-hmm.
feeling, and it's like comes from the gut. Like this was the connection to intuition. But over the time, I've learned that actually intuition comes in so many different ways. And maybe you can elaborate on that, like with the visual and smell and that kind of thing. And that never crossed my mind. So I was just, yeah, so I don't think I had any like woo moments. I
Yeah.
know that from a mom point of view, and that's something we wanted to talk about as well. I definitely have that motherhood intuition where I know exactly for my children what's the right thing, and that comes again from the gut, but also I think a lot from the heart. But yeah, I don't think I have really this like, is that weird about me? But I definitely would love to be more in tune to it, because I do think there is something to it. So that's why there is the conversation today. But yeah, maybe if you share a little bit about what is intuition and how does it come to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of close up the how I got here piece
Yeah.
with it, just to have that conversation. And in a nutshell, I had my awakening. I had my intuitive awakening, where what's called clairvoyancy, so my ability to see visuals, information, people, experiences, for me and my mind's eye, opened up in a really powerful way. And it was about a 7-year journey of, finding mentors, trying to understand, okay, what is this? How do I embody this? How do I tell people about this? So along the way, I was at this crossroads of, okay, am I this research professor or am I an intuitive medium? And a good friend of mine said, Bonnie, why not both? Like, yes, you're all of these things. And where I am today, it's such an honor to really combine all of that. And in the process, I led a research project where I interviewed 50 highly sensitive intuitives, empaths, psychics, mediums from around the world on their journey connecting with their intuition. And asking what their process was. And I'm excited to share a little bit about some of those findings today in this conversation. And what's really powerful is that we are so far from alone in our intuitive abilities. In fact, I feel very passionately we're all intuitive. Should we choose to want to connect with it more fully, what might that look like? That's our choice with it. But it's a really powerful way in which I believe we're able to connect with so much more than we maybe thought we were able to connect with. So that's a little bit about my journey and how I got here and went from that analytical. I'm still very analytical, love the research, but also have dove straight into the intuition world. So it's really wonderful being here with you.
Yeah, but that gives me a lot of hope. I mean, I'm not necessarily wanting to become a medium or something, but like you've been very analytical, very data driven. That even was your job and all of that. But now you are the combination, like I said, what I love about it. But like it's possible, even if you feel like there's not a lot of intuition there yet. I mean, like you said, it's probably hidden behind something. And I think you will share later as well some things that we can do to get more into it. So yeah, love that story. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, maybe if you, I don't know what you think the next best step is. Maybe tell us a bit more about what is intuition and how does it come, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And for me, what I like to think about is our intuition is these beautiful nudges and pieces of information that are here to guide us along our journey to follow our most aligned path. And we can use whatever language we want, call it universal consciousness, call it connecting with our higher self, connecting with guides, whatever words or phrases really resonate with you, really listen to that and honor that, because that self-trust and that tuning in is something that's really powerful along their journey. I'll give some examples of what intuition. So you talked a little bit about mother's intuition, right? I think that's such a powerful one, right? You don't know why, but you just know that this is the thing that is going to nurture your newborn baby. And you do that and then they stop crying, right? So it's this deep connection, this deep knowing. We don't always have to know why, to know that it feels so true within us. And for me, intuition is really tuning into those moments that are very true for you and learning to trust them more and more and use those as the guidepost along their journey. Another one I like to share of what is intuition, and I'll talk about, it comes in a lot of different ways, right? People can see visual information, they can see orbs, they can see ancestors, they can see synchronicities and numbers, seeing the same bird over and over and over again, right? It can come a lot of different ways. People can also hear information. We talked about those gut feelings. People can get goosebumps, right? That's called clairsentience, when we can feel information in our physical body. So each of these has a name, and it starts with a clair. So clairvoyancy is the visual. Clairaudience is when people often will hear music or people's voices. And it's really important here that when we are receiving this intuitive information, that it feels really grounded in our bodies, right? Because we really want to honor this deep knowing and really honor that self-trust. Like, we are deeply wise people, beings, if we give ourselves permission to really listen to that. I think a lot of times, be it social conditioning, be it limiting beliefs, we don't always listen to ourselves. We don't always trust ourselves to know that next aligned decision. And I feel intuition is best described as really helping us to tune into that and follow it. Yeah. I'm curious for you, what is intuition for you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, it's easy to think about intuition when it comes to my children. Like throughout their life, there's been a few things where I just knew there is something that I need to look into, find out, inform myself, learn, so that I can help them with something. So as example, my elder one, he had quite a flat hat when he was born and a bit of a bit misshaped head. Like, people have helmets for that and all of that. My husband was like, no, there's nothing wrong with him. Like, he's perfect. Like, there's nothing. But I kept looking at his head. It was like, I need to do something, because otherwise eventually someone will tell me he's got to, there's an issue. So I went, find a doctor and where and what can that be done. And then went to see someone, and we did some, I think it was called craniology, where they do some manipulation, and it all went away. And years later, my husband would look at the baby pictures. I took pictures of his head, obviously. It's like, I think you were right. and there was a few similar stories where, like, my older one has a bit of learning challenges as well. And I very early knew, I think this is what's going to come his way. And so I always inform myself about what could that be and what could I help him with. So it's like just the knowing, and not why, but just having this sense of like, there's something. But in other aspects of my life, I mean, I think intuition comes for me often with people. I find that easy to know, is that someone that I resonate with, someone that I get along with, or should I rather stay away? But in general terms of life, I don't think I'm very attuned to it. And there's actually a question that was coming to my mind. Could the intuition be confused with this word of like manifesting? You hear a lot of people, we manifest, we think about it, we manifest it. So I tell you a little story and you tell me if that maybe it was intuition or if that's something else. But basically, so I've been a very good driver all my life. I had no accidents until recently, where I suddenly started to have, when I'm driving, a vision of me having an accident. And that thought kept coming back to me over and over again until I had an accident. Not a big one, nothing major. But afterwards, I was like, was that intuition, or did I manifest that stupid accident?
Oh, what a great question. And I mean, I can ask a few questions. So for you, did you start getting that visual, or were you proactively trying to create that visual? Like, did the visual just like come to you? And
I
out of
remember when
nowhere?
it first came, I was like, I was driving in the car and I was thinking literally, you've never had an accident in your life. And in that moment of like, you never had an accident, I saw an accident in front of my visual eye, like, just out of random, I don't know. And then I kept thinking about it over and over again. So it was not, I don't think it was triggered by anything. I was literally just driving on a long, absolutely fine, straight road, listening to the radio, doing nothing, driving.
Yeah, yeah. What I will, it's always important to really listen and honor what it feels for you, right? What I will share is our thoughts are incredibly powerful because they are frequency, they're energy, there's scientific evidence around this. It's really beautiful. And therefore, it creates what we're surrounding ourselves, the relationships we surround ourselves with. So our thoughts are very, very powerful. I'm wondering though, because that visual came to you, it sounds like it just appeared versus you, versus like creating a vision board around it, right? Where you're like wanting to create that. It sounds like it could very much be an intuitive insight, piece of information, knowing, kind of foreshadowing of the future with it. But again, really listening when you get real quiet and, was this manifestation? Was this intuition? Really listening to what that answer is for you. And again, trusting what that means for you. But because it came to you, it sounds like it was almost like a supportive message of, hey, just be on the awareness that this may happen. Make sure you're wearing your seatbelt. Yeah. 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 But
But that brings me to another question. No, go ahead.
Well, you talked about that knowing around intuition. I just wanted to normalize this. I think one of the biggest passions for me is how do we not only normalize these abilities, but celebrate the heck out of them in our everyday lives, right? Because we're most likely what's really fascinating when I have the honor of working with clients and I coach people connecting with their intuition and also do intuitive readings for them. And what's really interesting is when they start to pay attention to all these times of their intuition or their gut feelings, or they're just like, I can't explain why, I just know. When they start to pay attention to them, it's like a muscle. And the more they start to notice those events happening, and then the more they're able to tune into them in real time to understand what that message is for them. So it's really phenomenal. When people talk about when they're connected with their intuition throughout the research project, they shared they're stronger leaders. They're more aligned with their decision making. They're stronger parents. They feel more connected to their children. They feel more aligned with their heart-led purpose. It was like over and over and over again, people were sharing these responses and open-ended questions. So when you talked about that intuition and that, knowing the different people that you resonate with, one of the ways I like to describe intuition for people is, have you ever met someone and you can't explain why you're just magnetically drawn to them and you just need to spend all this time around? Or on the flip side of that, where you meet someone and like all these alarms start going off and you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't hang out with this person. So you just go ahead and date them for 5 years anyway, just to see how it works out. Maybe that's just my story. But we know, like, our intuition knows. And what might it be like if we chose to listen to that and trust that a little bit more often?
Yeah, exactly. So the question that came to my mind was like, okay, so I saw that accident, whatever it is, but then I do think, I mean, like you said, for example, you saw that women coming through. I think from what I heard people talk about, that there are these things happening and you don't know what it means. So how would you go about finding out what could the meaning be behind, like what you said, like finding out who that woman was and all of that? What would you do about that?
Yeah. You could do a lot of different things, but what I recommend for people to do is in that moment, to, take a deep breath in, get really present. You can even visualize breathing deep into your heart to just drop, kind of use all of your body instead of just your brilliant brain. And then ask yourself, you can either say it out loud or ask it in your mind telepathically, and ask, okay, I'm feeling that this is a really strong message. What is this message trying to communicate with me? And let yourself be still. Let yourself be still just for 30 seconds. And then be aware of any thoughts, sensations, gut feelings, insights that are coming to you in that moment. Be aware of what's coming through first and trust that and follow that. That often will give people a lot of guidance and clarity, because our intuition is connecting with us all day, every day. And I believe, and what a lot of research is showing, it always has. We've just often become pretty numb to it in the noise and the demand for our attention of today's world. I mean, I get notifications. I turn all my notifications off my phone. But for example, you're getting your advertisements everywhere, conversations, or, there's noise everywhere. When we let ourselves really get still in those moments and tune in, we often are able to have a deeper understanding of what that message is for us. And then we can stay there. We can ask follow-up questions. Great. How am I supposed to take that into my modern life? Thank you. Right. So just keep building that muscle and tuning in. It will get easier along the journey from what people share over and over. And just keep trusting with that. There's a lot of different activities we can do. We could dive into it, but as an overview for today, that's something that I really recommend.
Yeah. But I think this is exactly what resonates with me now is my life used to be incredibly fast paced, always doing, never stopping for relaxation, anything like that. And I think when I think about the intuition now, I feel like there probably has been moments where there was something coming, but I just brushed it off as oh, this doesn't make sense, because obviously my brain wants to make sense of things, data, analytical, all of that. And this is just weird. Well, let's move on, let's get going with the things that we really have to do. And I think I would have not stopped in the past, whereas now I definitely have that knowing again that if I stop, there's actually always something there if I take a moment. So I think this is, it's just interesting that really that's what you did, to then, I assume, to really listen to the things that come to you and to build the muscle. And again, it's the whole get out of that hustle, bustle, and doing mentality. This is obviously why I created the peaceful productivity. And maybe it's a good point where we can lead over to maybe using intuition for, efficiency and productivity and that kind of thing. And I do think probably when I make decisions, I do use intuition, though I maybe wouldn't name it that, but I think it's when I make the decisions, not just crunching the numbers. I think I do ask myself, what do you feel? What's telling in whatever way? But yeah, maybe there's something else that you can share in terms of how can we tap intuition, use it when it comes to making decisions, use it when thinking about what are our priorities, what do we want to get done. Yeah, I'm curious to see what you have to say around that.
Absolutely. And this is what came directly out of the research findings, is when people shared. So just to give a little context of the research, and it was 50 adults from all over the world, predominantly in the United States, but all over the world. And they were doctors, CPAs, nurses. There was a prison warden. We had Reiki masters, healers, practicing mediums as well. But we had people that were deeply in tune with their intuition, that were in so many different sectors of the world and of professions. And over and over and over again, they talked about the more that they tuned in with their intuition, the more that they learned to really decipher what those messages meant for them and learn to trust themselves along the journey, the clearer their decision making became, the more rapid they were able to understand a strategic plan and then work to implement it within their organization because of that clarity, because of that focus. So to tie directly back to your question of how are they connected, or do I feel they're connected? I feel absolutely they are connected, and it creates that clarity, and it creates that, and it's a clarity that comes from within or moves through us, whatever way we want to look at it. It's that clarity of deep knowing and trust. And often it's rooted in this very expansive energy, this very expansive, collaborative, connected way of seeing the world that helps people with their productivity. It helps people be like, okay, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to do it. Obviously we're humans. There's a lot of things that we're balancing, right? So is it going to like be the silver bullet? No, we still have to do our stuff. We have to do our work, right? That's our commitment to this lifetime. But I would say one of the ways in which it links to productivity very directly is that clarity that comes from it, that inner knowing of like, okay, I was a research professor and I knew along this journey is like, okay, I'm pivoting, and my passion is how are we supporting each other and connecting with that deep knowing, that deep wisdom that many cultures around the world are connected to in their everyday lives. Is really only about kind of the last 400 or so years that we've learned to really shut it off for a range of reasons. But we're seeing this really beautiful reopening, reconnection happening. And it's exciting. It's a really exciting time. Yeah. I saw that Jenny, hello, Jenny, by the way. I saw that you've got 2 questions. Is it okay if we respond to her questions or their questions?
Yeah, go for it.
So my 2 questions for later: how does intuition communicate? And how do you improve your intuition? Beautiful. So the first one, how does intuition communicate? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but just as a quick refresh here, it comes in many forms, and it can come through all of our senses. So some people have clairvoyancy, so see things with either their eyes open, such as ancestors, visual information, seeing things like a wreck that might be forthcoming, right? And to use your example, those can happen with our eyes open or in our mind's eye in places like meditation, for example. People receive intuitive information through smell, through touch, through hearing information, through taste, and also seeing synchronicities. So this is a form of clairvoyancy because we're using our eyes to see it, but maybe we're seeing the same number like 222 over and over again, or 555 over and over again, right? It can come a lot of different ways. It can also, intuitive information can communicate with us, or information from our higher self, our divine purpose, whatever word you want to use, can come through vivid dreams. A lot of people talked about having vivid dreams as well. I'll share an example of smell, because I think this is one that a lot of people have experienced, but maybe didn't know what it was. So I had a person in the research project talked about one day they were standing in the living room and they smelled roses. And there were no physical roses in the room, but the smell was really, really strong. And in that moment, she got this overwhelming sensation of calm and love wash over her body. And she thought of her mother. And her mother had passed away when this happened, or like before this had happened. And she realized that her ability to smell the roses was a way that her mother, who had passed away, was communicating with her and giving her that intuitive information of, I'm still here with you. I know it's very, very different than when I was in physical form, but I'm still with you on an energetic level. And it created so much comfort for the research participants. I still have that deep connection. Like, yes, it's absolutely very different, but to know that we're still deeply connected, that's really powerful. Yeah. I'll share another example. Is it helpful to share
Yes,
these
please. I love
examples?
those examples.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to normalize them in our everyday, right? It's really phenomenal. I was working with a client on intuition mentoring, so helping her to really step into her abilities and understand how can she use them in her everyday. And we finished our one-on-one session, and we were in my office, and then she went to the restroom, and then she came back to the office, and she's like, "Oh, what is that? What is that you're burning? It smells so good." Well, I hadn't lit anything. I didn't have any Palo Santo or any incense or anything like that. And so this is the space that she was in for the last, hour and a half. And I was like, "Oh, nothing. I didn't burn anything, but what did it smell like to you?" And she very understandably like started shifting into like, what am I smelling? What is that? Like, we're kind of like stress, curiosity. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" So again, with that, okay, we have an intuitive experience. This is our opportunity to pause in that moment and tune in. What is this meaning for us? So I said, when you smelled that smell, what do you notice about any thoughts or sensations that you notice in this moment of maybe what it would be if it was a message? And she said, "It's so interesting. As soon as I smelled that, before I told you I was smelling it, my first thought was, I need to slow down and take in the session and let it really integrate." And I said, "Well, in that reflection, like, how does that feel for you with that being the message?" She's like, "It feels so true in my body. There's this deep knowing with it." So that was an example where she smelled something. She used the clair ability to smell. And she was able to really tune into, oh, this was a message for me to really integrate the experience from our session, versus where my mind was going is like, okay, here are the 37 things I have to do after the session on my to-do list before picking up the kids from school. And it was such a practical example of how this information can come to us and the information that's available to us when we give ourselves that like brief period of pause after those experiences happen. And it can be so, yes, it absolutely can include connecting with loved ones that have passed away. And it could be so much other information too, right? So it's really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love these examples. It's nice to get some actually like really like concrete life
Mhm.
thoughts there. I'm thinking, as someone who's on the go and all, if I don't have the time to like pause, then could I, let's say, okay, I noticed something, maybe I write it down somewhere. Does it work if I come back to it later and I think about it later, or is it more like really in the moment, I'm feeling it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can absolutely. I'll often meditate on, I try to have a daily-ish meditation practice, and meditation comes in many forms. It doesn't just have to be sitting down. It could be walking in nature. It can be making art. It can be dancing with your eyes closed, right? Whatever gets you in the present moment is what I would define as meditation for the sake of connecting with our intuition. So, absolutely, you can certainly say, okay, there's a million things happening. I've noticed this really strong smell, or I noticed this taste in my mouth that wasn't anything I was eating at the time, right? I'm going to note that. And then when I go to my mindfulness practice, whatever that is, let me set the intention to call back in that experience and just think about it. And then ask the question. I have found, in what people have shared in the research, the more specific the question, the more specific the response. So, dear intuition, could you help me understand what that taste in my mouth was trying to communicate for me in support of my journey? Right. And then meditate on that and see what comes through. See if any thoughts or gut feelings. Like, most often, when we give ourselves even just a few minutes to be still with that experience, clarity will come to us. It's really powerful. Is it really powerful to do it in real time? Yes. I recommend it if possible, but you can always come back to it. Yeah.
And then let's say you meditating on it and you're getting some answers, like, do these answers again come in some sort of visual form, or is that just your inner knowing then? Visual,
Yeah.
auditory, or like, is that coming like again with messages, or is that just you kind of talking to yourself?
Yeah. How do you, yeah, it can come in any form. And in the research, people shared having information come to them in a wide range of ways. So it doesn't, just because maybe somebody has a little more of a visual sense or somebody gets goosebumps all the time, it doesn't mean that goosebumps are the only way that your intuition can communicate with you. So I want us to invite that possibility of we're able to be connected so many different ways with this. And while you can really focus on one if you would like, I invite us to have that space to be open, that it can come through visual insights. It can come through gut feelings. It can come through hearing information, right? So it can come in a wide range of ways, to answer your question with that. One of those is, how do I know if it's just my thoughts, or how do I know if it's my intuition coming through? And again, listen to you. What does it feel like for you deep in your knowing? Honor that first and foremost. What we have found is that our analytical reasoning, very powerful. We need it. It's not a one or the other. It can be, or maybe more egocentric thinking. It can be very rapid and very kind of like higher stress, higher anxiety, and rooted in I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. When it is our intuition communicating with us, most often it tends to come through in a very grounded tone, a grounded energy. It feels very absolute, and it feels very spacious. It feels very, anything is possible with this. I am safe when I'm receiving this information. So it's a different feeling most often when it's maybe an anxiety symptom or a stress response or our ego communicating, versus when our intuitive knowing comes in. Often when it's our intuitive knowing, it's very succinct in its communication. It uses very short sentences as a way, like they don't have a lot of run-on sentences. And it can often sound like that inner voice that you have running all the time. So just because it has the same quote unquote sounding voice doesn't mean it's not your intuition. Just really listening. Is it really grounded? Does it feel safe in your body? Does it feel calm? It might be very exciting, right? It doesn't mean that we're not going to be really excited about it. But that often is a way that we can distinguish between the two. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel that's probably going to be part of the answer you would give me to my next question. So like, I think we spoke about it a while ago, and going back to the productivity. So what I often feel is like, I've got certain things to do, got my plans, my to-do lists, all of that. And then obviously there are days where I just don't really feel like doing the thing. And then I sit there and I'm like, okay, is that my intuition maybe telling me that today this is not the right day? Or am I just procrastinating, and am I being lazy? So I'm curious to have your insights on that. Like, how could I use my intuition when it comes to those moments of like, oh, should I do this or should I do that? And how do I feel today? And I sense like there's part of the tuning into the body, and how does my voice talk to me in that moment? Is it like the anxiety or the avoiding, I don't want to do this thing, or is it really the, and this is what you need right now, voice talking to me? But
Yeah. And really similar to the previous response, but absolutely. What a beautiful question. And again, I can only speak on the research participants' experience and my own experience with it. But what people shared is that when it is intuitively guided, it tends to be something that is very clear. It's very, okay, this is time to rest. Our body is about to be in overwhelm. We've been going, going, going. Now is the time that we need to rest. And really honor that and ask, how long does that rest need to be? But being very being very honest with ourselves of what is the motivator behind this. Is it just because this thing that I'm procrastinating on is really scary for me and it stretches my comfort zone? Honor that, right? Like sometimes getting on video can be really scary, right? As an example, I remember the first time I wrote a first blog post, I was so nervous about it, right? So really honoring yourself and your inner knowing of, am I really procrastinating here, or is this my intuition guiding me to rest? Most often, I will say always, but to be the researcher me, most often, when it is our intuition, it is something that is very much like this, let's go here, let's move forward, this is what we're doing. And really listening to that and being honest with ourselves and having complete compassion for the human experience, right? We're balancing so many things, especially, you've got beautiful children and ours are teenagers, right? So it's like there's a lot that we're balancing, and sometimes our body just needs to rest. But using our intuition as a guide and support for that most aligned life, and not something to be another thing that we're procrastinating.
Yeah. What I take with me from that and from what you said before, I think, is for me personally, asking more questions and asking the specific questions. I just wrote down how long does the rest need to be. I think this for me is a very, very good question of like, because often I don't, like I know I should rest, but I have all these things to do and I only have so much time. But I think what then in my mind happens is like, the rest might be an hour or whatever, but maybe intuition will tell me just take 5 minutes, and like it's like asking the question. I think this is really what I'm taking away from this. But yeah, I think it's a good point to maybe shift gears, and I'm also aware of the time. And I really want to see what you've got there in terms of the practical exercise that you want to share with us, how we can get into intuition.
Absolutely. So the biggest one is learning that self-trust and keep trusting in. Another activity I'll guide us through is using our intuitive yes and no's. And this is really powerful for our decision making. This is really helpful for improving our productivity and clarity, and therefore efficiency with it, because we're not spinning our wheels in a lot of ways. Before we hop into that, there's one thing that I do recommend for people is, most often, like now that we've got a little more of a framework around what intuition is and the many ways it can come, is take a few minutes, if you like to journal, get a pen and paper out and just think about, what were some times that my intuition connected with me or communicated with me or gave me insights and information. That time that I met that partner that I knew I shouldn't have dated, but I dated them for 5 years anyway, right? Or that time where I couldn't explain why, I just needed to turn left. So I turned left and I ran into a friend I hadn't seen in years, right? Or, whatever those are, jotting them down with what's already happened to you in the past, or when you knew as a mother, like, we need to get care for our child's head and make sure that everything is nurtured there. Writing them down and seeing them in our 3D world with pen and paper can be really powerful for amplifying our awareness of our intuition. And we're more easily able to see those nudges in the future and start to build that trust. So it's a really fun activity that I recommend. Yeah. Okay. So do you want to do an activity here where we're tuning into our yes and no's?
Yes.
Okay,
I hope
awesome.
Jenny is ready to do that too, if she can.
Jenny, we would love for you to join if that works. So what I recommend here is standing up. I'm going to readjust a little bit so we can be on camera. Okay, awesome. So we're going to stand, and the goal here is we're just going to ask ourselves a question that we know the answer is yes to, and a question that we know the answer is no to. And I'll guide us through it. But what we're going to do is we're going to listen and be aware of our body's response. So I'll guide us through it. So we'll stand. I recommend having your palms facing forward, just at a comfortable spot at your hips. I'm just showing you what it looked like on camera. And we'll stand here and close our eyes. Take a deep breath in through our nose. We can imagine that breath going into the center of our heart, opening that up. Exhaling that breath all around us, just coming into this present moment. And in this present moment, letting our body just be really stable, let's ask ourselves a question that we know the answer is yes to. So for me, I'll ask, and I recommend one that's not too emotionally charged here. So for me, I'll use, do I love ice cream? I know I love ice cream. So I'm going to say, do I love ice cream? And after I ask the question that I know the answer is yes to, I'm simply going to notice anything that I notice in how my body responds to that. Maybe it's tingles, maybe it's a slight forward movement, maybe it's a different feeling. Let's just take a moment here, ask ourselves that question that we know the answer is yes to, and then notice what we notice. And if it's helpful, you can ask that same question again, just one more time to really root it in and notice anything that your body is responding with. Okay. So I want to come back together just for a second and chat about, did you notice anything with how your body responded? Maybe it was like a forward or backwards movement.
Yeah, I kept feeling like I'm going like this. Probably,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to watch this back because I had my eyes closed, but I'm curious if I did something like that. But I felt like forward to the left, just constantly like that. And I felt a little bit of a sensation, like not a tightening, but something going on here.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And Jenny, what about you? Okay, they felt more happy, forward movement. Awesome. Awesome. So that is a way that your body, your intuition is using it's communicating with you through your body as a tool, right? We can kind of think of ourselves as these really awesome antennas walking around, and we're always getting intuitive information because it is us. Like, we are our highest selves already, right? It's just our job to step into that, right? So you can think about this for your decision making. Do I want to attract this client or this client? For example, tune into your body, see what it's saying, right? If it's giving you that yes, then you follow it, right? So for today's practice, we'll keep it light, we'll keep it simple. The more emotionally charged the question, like, should I stay with this partner, right? I recommend that we build up our trust a little bit to get there, because our analytical brain is beautiful. We need it, but it jumps in immediately. And sometimes it's hard to really tune into our body sensations when something's a little bit heavier. So practice with these lighter things, build up that knowing, and then get to those heavy hitters. All right. So let's do that same thing, but we're going to ask ourselves a question that we know the answer is no to. Sound good?
Good.
Awesome. So we're going to take a deep breath into our heart. Exhale that breath all around us. And now, from this neutral place, let's ask ourselves a question that we know the answer is no to. So, do I want to get rid of my dog? Would be one for me. Let's take a moment here in silence and just tune in. Feel free to ask yourself that same question twice, just to really tune into your response there. And there's no rush at all, but we'll slowly start to come back together and chat about what we noticed when we asked ourselves a question of what the no was. So I'm
Well, I
curious.
got pulled back. I just got pulled back immediately. And I could feel my eyes going a bit like inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally different from before. Totally different.
Yeah, and everybody's a little bit different too. So that's what's so awesome about this, is that we often feel it. Sometimes we have gotten so disconnected from our body that it can be really hard to tune into this. So I always want to hold so much compassion. But again, it is a muscle. So if maybe those that are watching the video didn't notice anything, worry not. Show up to it with the, do I want to eat this orange, right? Just keep practicing it. Let yourself know that it's very safe to tune into the wisdom of your intuition in your body and notice what starts coming through. So I always want to do that disclaimer. So, Anne, you talked about it. You moved back a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jenny's saying for no, it was dropping shoulders, then stand still. So she also had a different body sensation there. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's very like, I'm not going anywhere. This is a no.
Yeah, standing strong. Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. So this is a really powerful tool that one helps to really build in that awareness with your intuitive knowing. And it's like a muscle. Again, so play around, practice with it. Do I want to eat Chinese food tonight? Do I want to eat tacos tonight? Right? Whatever that is. And have fun with it. Oh, that is such a big thing here. We're allowed to have so much fun with this. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then we can use that in our business decision making and our parenting decision making, going back and really trusting that intuitive knowing, that deep, deep wisdom that I feel very strongly we're all connected to.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm really surprised that I felt that so strongly. But it just confirms that thing that I know there is something there. And I'm going to play around with that. Have some fun with like yes and no. And I think the food thing is really easy.
Yeah.
And then probably things like, do I want to go to that supermarket or this supermarket or whatever it is? So yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to be so respectful of your time. What would be most supportive as we, I guess, start to come
I think if you just share where people can find you quickly, and then obviously, I don't know if Jenny has a last question she wants to drop in the chat, if at all. Otherwise, just thank you so much for being here with me, Bonnie.
Of course, of course. It's such a joy. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. You can find me at intuitivebynature.com. I'm also on Instagram at intuitive_by_nature. And my name is Bonnie Casamassima. It was really, really wonderful being here with you and sharing this information. Just as a FYI, we're launching a podcast series the beginning of May that's unpacking the research findings. It's a 6-episode series. So you can find that on the website as well, intuitivebynature.com/podcast. And you could be the first to know when it gets launched if you're wanting to dive deeper in those research findings. Huge shout out, Celeste Page Sample was someone who helped with the research project, and she helped with the data analysis. She's phenomenal. So she and I are co-hosting it.
It sounds cool. Yeah, I'm definitely going to tune in. I want to find out more. I love the fact that you were saying as well that people came from all sorts of backgrounds and walks of life, because in my head, an intuitive medium is that, like, it's always that medium. But you said there were, prison guards and whatnot. So thank you. And Jenny also is saying thank you, and she's going to tune into the podcast. And thanks, Jenny, for being here. And Bonnie, thank you again. It was lovely. I had so much fun.
This was so wonderful, Anne. Thank you so much.